Welcome in Cannabis Conversations. I am your fortunate host, Sean Welsh. I am absolutely excited about today because today sort of combines things that I think are interesting. Robotics, sort of the idea as a car kid, the idea of watching cars be built by machines has always been fascinating to me. And so now I want to hear more about how robotics will play into the cannabis industry. And so we have, I think, probably the best person to ask and to talk about these things with today. Nohtal from Sorting Robotics, man. How are you?
Hey man, I'm doing well. Yeah, just kind of hanging out in balmy Sacramento today.
Balmy Sacramento. I bet we don't say that very often, do we?
Yeah, not really.
Very good, man. Very good. Before we jump into today's show, as always, this season, I want to be extremely thankful to our sponsors. Today's wonderful episode is sponsored by King Solomon Nutrients, my man, Damian Solomon. If you don't know him, guy's got 2 decades of experience. He knows how to grow anything from tomatoes to the big green plant. He's an absolute freaking master. Hydro soil makes no difference. He's got you covered. Head over to ksolomon.com. KSolomonAG. I always forget that one. .com. Check it out. Damian's a great guy with absolutely the best product on the market. Nohtal, let's get started. We like to start the show off the same way every time, which is getting into people's origin story. How did Nohtal come into contact with this beautiful plant at where we find ourselves today?
Yeah, that's always a kind of fun story to recount, which probably is fun for most people. The very first time I smoked weed and like got high, I was in high school and it was like 17 or something. And yeah, my first experience was like smoking weed and then laughing nonstop for 4 hours, which I think is what most people kind of go through. And and so I had some like kind of exposure to that when I was younger. And as I got into college, it was very much like like a drinking culture and like kind of a smoking weed culture. I went to college at like UC Davis, and I always found myself biasing my proclivities for like going to parties and stuff recreationally away from alcohol because my family has like long history of like alcohol disease, and so I've always kind of never really been a fan of alcohol, and I always biased towards the thing that made me laugh for 4 hours. And so I always had like a kind of positive in terms of recreational standpoint for it. And then as I got older and like Colorado came online and Washington came online and there was more research being done, I started learning more about the scientific aspects of it. And I'm an engineer. Like I went to school for engineering and then eventually I went to work at NASA for a few years. So very much on like the scientific side of things. So as I got older, I became much more biased towards cannabis, much more negative towards alcohol, tobacco, any of these other things, and then much more positive towards the future of cannabis and the actual medical benefits that it can have, as well as the fun recreational benefits. So that's kind of my initial background into like kind of touching and kind of being heavily into just the plant itself.
See, so I like where you start there with high school. And I will say, Nohtal, if you get a chance, go back, check out Kenya Alexander's episode on the show, aired a couple weeks ago. When you talk about everyone kind of having a similar laughing experience, that young lady did not.
Oh, she didn't?
It
Oh
is
no.
Nohtal, it's one of the scariest fucking stories I've ever heard in my life, dude. It was pretty insane. But she's super, super awesome. And she's the cannabis mom as far as I'm concerned of Texas. But anyways, the
Okay.
idea of finding it in high school, finding it recreationally, similar path to you. I think I found it a little bit earlier, but no difference. It was about for me, it was about the release, whether it's laughing, whether it was just the emotion of being a, 15-year-old boy or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it made things slightly easier for me. Did you grow up in California, man?
Yeah, I grew up in LA.
You grew up in LA. Okay, so it's really been a part of the scene, the culture very closely for you, and even at a
Yeah.
distance for most of your life, I would say. Then, I mean, growing up in LA, right?
Yeah, it was always like one order removed.
Yeah,
My dad was also a part
exactly.
of Normal and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you say that, man. That's what I like about New York now, because it's one order removed from New York. Now it just smells like weed. So to me, it's
Yeah.
way better. But so when you get into it, when you get into college, the idea that I think there's a lot to be said. I want to circle back to the idea that you kind of shunned alcohol as a college student, but mindfully. So I want to ask you, where did you make the connection between your family history? Because I come from the exact same history. I just wasn't. I wasn't able to make that disconnect as you were without hitting some bottoms first. But at the end of the day, when did you first become aware of that with your relationship with alcohol and your family?
Oh, when I was young, like
Really?
I think I just wasn't really exposed to alcohol really until college so much because my mom doesn't drink. I grew up with my mom, um, and my grandfather, he got liver disease and kidney disease from drinking alcohol and just consistent drinking for 30 years and got that. He had diabetes, like the whole kind of classic. He was never like, and the thing was, he was never like like a raging alcoholic or something like that. He was just like every day after work, he would go have a few drinks with his friends. You do that for enough time, and cirrhosis of the liver is like a real thing, right? And so I knew that from when I was young, from like 9, 10, but I never really made any conscious decisions about it because I was just like not exposed to alcohol. I was super nerdy when I was in high school, so I wouldn't really like go to parties or anything. But then when you're in college, it's like in your face, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say I probably for the first four, so I took 5 years to graduate because I took 6 months off for like a internship. But for the first 4 years, I probably drank like 6 times over the course of the 4 years. And I mean, I didn't even really smoke that much. I probably smoked like once a month at that time. I was like very cognizant of like, I mean, I was like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I want my brain to like continue to develop as much as I possibly can. I need every edge. I need every edge I can.
Yeah, and
And
it's what is
so
it, like 23, right? I think that's what my therapist told me. The male brain isn't fully
yeah.
developed at 23, and I thought, man, I screwed that pooch early on. Someone should have told me that when I was 15. Then maybe I would have avoided all the drugs, hallucinogenics, and fun. But who you learn about who you are, Nohtal. That's the difference there.
Yeah.
The alcohol scene, was that at UC Davis, right? Obviously, you're California. There's weed everywhere. There's probably
Yeah.
psychedelics. There's some booze. Was that easy to
Shrooms
avoid?
weren't that
So my wife doesn't drink.
Okay.
So everywhere we go, that's an event or whatever, people look at her. They always ask her, like, are you recovering? Are you this? She's like, no, I just don't like this. Like, I've never enjoyed this. I don't get it. Did you run into things like that? Or was it just kind of like you said, you sort of stayed on the peripheral, so there wasn't a lot of peer pressure or peer influence to that discussion?
Oh no, that came up a lot. They're like, "Oh, like why don't you drink?" I was like, "Yeah, I just like don't like it." Like that's what I would say. I was like, "Yeah, I don't." They're like, "Oh, you gotta drink." I'm like, "No, I don't need to." Like, and so I just yeah, I just wouldn't. And then even like when it came to smoking weed, I had this thing when I was in college with the whole like brain thing, and I was like, well, I want to give myself enough time to let it leave my system and then smoke again. And so the cool thing about that is that every time you smoke weed, you get like really lit, right?
Yeah.
You get like blitz. And I would only smoke out of a bong too. And so like every time I was
Like Christmas Day, you're
yeah.
only willing to open presents for yourself on Christmas Day. That's it. You're gonna smoke the bong. You're gonna and every 30 days. Look, I tell you, there's something to that, man. I mean, and plus the cost structure there, really, that starts to really be great for a college student as well. You can really, I mean, an eighth can go
Spent
a
like no
long
money
way
on
if all
weed.
you smoke is
Yeah.
a bong a month. Like that's heavy hits right there, dude. Good for you, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was kind of how I did it. And yeah, but when I would go to parties, I just like wouldn't drink. And then, after the first year or two, people are like, oh yeah, Natal like just doesn't drink. And so I would do it very rarely. Even now, I mean, these days, I don't really like gravitate towards alcohol and um yeah, I mean, I don't really drink. I think the only time I really drink now is like if I'm with my team at Korean barbecue. Like
Okay,
every
all right.
quarter we
Well,
do
then
like a
let's
thing.
let me form this to a different style because, as I told you pre-show, I live in the prohibition state of Wisconsin, so we
Hmm.
see all kinds of weird shit. And right now, the hot weird shit is beverages in the THC market. So, are you a THC beverage guy, not a booze guy, but a beverage guy to that extent?
Uh Not really. I mean, I've gotten a few of it. I don't feel like the high from a THC beverage. I mean, I know a few people that own THC beverage companies, so I don't want to like knock them or anything.
No.
I
I think
just
it's just a
don't
fair
think
discussion to have
that's
because I feel the same way. I don't know if it's how I
yeah.
metabolize or how I've been metabolizing it my whole life. I don't know, but when I get done, I just kind of feel like I had a carbonated beverage. I don't feel any different, but maybe it's maybe I should wait to smoke the joint then. I don't know. There's probably a whole problem that I run into there with the way I approach it.
I have a feeling it's because THC beverages need either nano emulsified or uh, like water soluble THC. And I think you're just getting the THC. And I'm very much a proponent of like the full spectrum, all the cannabinoids, all the terpenoids, all these things, they all affect your high. And when you just do THC, you strip away all of that. And like personally, I don't even like super high THC percentage weed. I like the weed that like smells good. And when I get hit with like a bong rip or something like that, it's not gonna put me to sleep because like I normally will do gummies to go to sleep because it's just like makes me feel rested and it's kind of like an off switch and I don't have anything going on in my mind. But if I'm like hanging out with my friends and like just want to chill or something, I don't really I'm not gonna go to like a THC beverage because it's just THC. And I've been in the space long enough to understand like that's like I mean that's a big part of the equation, but it's not the whole equation, right? There's so much more, and I don't think the THC beverage space. I haven't seen a full spectrum THC beverage, and I don't think there's one that exists like in a real way.
Right, in a real way. And again, when I say real way, we're talking about hemp infused here, right? So we're talking about D9 and we're talking about all these, created pieces. And you get a little bit like, okay, what am I really dealing with here, And that's the unregulation. Again, we could go on for days about unregulation and why things look the way that they do. But there was the interesting part that I like about what you said there is the smell, right? And something. Boy, I mean, I don't know if people will pull out the sound bite from that one, but not liking high percentage THC, geez, that seems like crazy talk right now. I'm in the same boat. Many years ago, I thought it was the most important thing. Like I said, we kind of grew up alongside the Colorado medical scene. And so there was things like that when guys were developing 15, 18, 20, when it even became a part of the discussion, frankly, right? Because before that, even that was so like my evolution, it was like, dank versus swag, okay, and then there was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Then it was like, okay, here's a name once in a while. You get your Maui Wowies. You're like, okay, now it's a name thing, and we watched the same thing happen there. Now it's not a name thing. Now it's a percentage thing, right? We have to find kind of the new marketing hook and deal.
Mhm.
And as someone who's been around marketing my whole life, I see it. I watched the evolution of having to name things. But what broke it for me, my wife and I were on a wild road trip in Northern California up to Oregon. And we get to Oregon, we stop in a dispensary. We're all excited. And the guy's like, oh, well, over here's our 30 to 50%. And I'm like, what? Like we've jumped the shark. Like I can't even
Yeah. Yeah.
find this, like the only cool thing about the dispensary was I could still take the nugget out. And to your point, I could break it and get that just right off the middle there, right when you break it. That's a magical moment where you don't get that in a lot of states now. You gotta
Yeah.
look at it through packages, or you gotta like use this weird like snort hole. I mean, again, guys, I just don't get why we have to make it so hard. Anyways, Nohtal, when you look at where so you're at UC, you're doing your thing. How do we get from there to NASA?
Well, that route is actually quite straightforward. So, I mean, and when I was an undergrad, I was studying mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering with a minor in performance guitar. I graduated there. I went to Georgia Tech. I got a master's degree in aerospace engineering. Georgia Tech is a funnel school for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and so I um, I actually started my first company in Georgia Tech. It was like a desktop 3D printing company. Didn't work out super well, but it did. I did ship product to customers in US and Canada, and so like it had some minor success. Um, and then from there, kind of used that experience and my master's degree to go into NASA. And then I worked at NASA for 4 years. So that I would say the path from like school to NASA made generally linear sense.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so it does. I like the idea too. I'm a big sports guy. So you talk about funnel schools, right? This idea that
Yeah.
NASA has a place where they're like, look, these are the top places we go to find our guys, and you guys are probably aware of that, right? If that's the track you're trying to get on, I find that to be very cool that you're even offered that sort of approach.
Yeah.
When you start your first company, what were you say it didn't work out? Was there something specific that didn't work out? Was it about something that you had missed along the way? I love hearing that sort of initial entrepreneurial story as well.
Yeah, well, so this is back in 2013, 2014. So like 10 years ago. That was the first company I started. So wow. Um, there, it was a desktop 3D printing company. So this is 2014, 2013, back when there was kind of this like peak of 3D printing is going to change the world sort of hype. And I had just been exposed to it like a year prior. And it was really a terrible hyper fragmented market. And and at that time, I didn't even know what something like that meant. Um, but the whole reason why I started that company was because I had bought a kit to make a desktop 3D printer, and I made it. It was kind of a pain in the ass, and I just thought to myself, yeah, I could definitely design something that makes way more sense. I could definitely make a kit that makes way more sense, and I think I'm gonna start my own thing. And at that time, Kickstarter was really big, and like on Kickstarter, basically every week or every month there were one or two new desktop 3D printing products that were being promoted on Kickstarter. It was like you know, custom playing cards and desktop 3D printers. It was every day on the front page. And so that's what kind of got me started. I said I could do this. So I did it. I did my first year of grad school, kind of running this company on the side as I was trying to do my first year of grad school. That was really hard. I was able to do that Kickstarter campaign and then leverage that into getting to a startup accelerator that was based out of the South in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is nice because it was close to Georgia Tech. And I did that. I did that startup accelerator program. I learned a lot, delivered products, got a couple of investors, and then very quickly noticed that those investors didn't really want to have the company leave the state, and I wanted to build a technology company, that builds 3D printers. And Chattanooga, Tennessee, is not really the hub for technological development in the United States, as one would assume. And I kind of had this issue with my investors, and then we noticed that the market was so fragmented, it was very difficult to continue to scale sales, which we're doing okay, but we needed to be better positioned. And then from there, we kind of like spun down the company, and I went back to grad school to finish my last year, and then from there went to Jiko.
Damn, man, that's a lot to get done. I mean, you're talking about 10 years ago to where you are today. Pretty impressive ride throughout that. You started the show by telling me you weren't the smartest guy in the room. Today, I can assure you, you are. Just so you know, you have
Maybe.
done more college. I did about 5 minutes. You did many years of it. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had my company since 2013.
Okay.
But it's been my sole focus. I haven't done anything else. I certainly didn't get my master's or go work for NASA in that time. So pretty badass, man. Pretty cool story for you. So tell me, how does one have a gig at NASA? Probably, I don't know, like it, not like it. Maybe it was or wasn't what you thought it would be. Where do we go from there?
Okay. So the path from NASA to cannabis is definitely not as straightforward as the path from UC Davis to NASA. So I was working at NASA. I knew I wanted to start another company, but the first company was so hard, it was like almost traumatizing. And so I was like, I'm gonna just chill and work for a few years and kind of get some more engineering experience. And I really liked working at NASA. And I think most people that work at NASA really like working at NASA. It is probably one of the few places in the world that everyone there is a genius, like just flat out. Like they're all super smart, and the culture there is about being smart and like
Yeah.
doing smart things, right? That's a very rarefied air, but it has a cost in that situation. And that cost is that it's basically a government facility. It's run like a government facility, which means the amount of bureaucracy is like 3 to 1. In every meeting, there's like 3 managers and one guy who actually does the work. And I was always that one guy who actually does the work. And I'm sitting in some of these meetings and I just think, what are you guys doing here? Like me and that guy have done everything that you all are talking about, and you're not asking so, but there's a reason for that, and I get it. It's fine. But it wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah,
And
well, hold on a second. I mean, there's a reason for bureaucracy, I suppose, but I got to tell you something. Nothing would drive me out. Well, nothing drove me out of I had a corporate job before I started my company, and at a corporate job, that's what drove me off, right?
yeah,
Because I've had a pretty entrepreneurial spirit. So you come up with an idea, the company takes it, they present it as their own. You're like, okay, well, that should show up in the Christmas bonus, Instead, I'm in the Jelly of the Month club, and it just doesn't. Nothing comes together for me. And it's not about. I don't need a name on the plaque. I'm a hippie capitalist, right? So I'm looking to make money, and I deserve to be paid. If you're going to pitch this and sell this, or it's going to do something on your end to profit you, that should profit me. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to find a way that that's never going to happen to me again. And so I respect that part of it. The rarefied air, it sounds almost terrifying to go to work, right? Because then I get why you're saying, you've been in rooms where you're not the smartest guy. That must feel like a lot to just be in a room of guys who've been doing it forever. But then as you tear off the onion a little bit, you realize there's only like 4 of you who actually do work. I find that to be sum up our government about as best as possible, man. So
yeah.
You get the passion to get out on your own. Tell us what happens next.
Yeah. So in my last year of being at NASA, I started this company, and we were not in cannabis at all. I wanted to be in cannabis, but I didn't know what to build. I had a couple friends that were, one guy was doing like terpene stuff, another guy was doing vape stuff, another guy had like a, legacy grow and stuff like that. And so, but none of them really knew what I could do. And I think it's because none of them really had like a very large perspective on the industry. And so I didn't build anything, and I was just like, okay, well, I want to do something else. And we built a device called the Roka Sorter. So that was a device that sorted trading cards for e-commerce sellers. So think a computer vision powered pick and place system that would scan Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering cards and then organize them in any fashion that a person who sold on the secondary market, like a big e-commerce seller on eBay or whatever, would need to organize and inventory all their cards. And that was our first product. So that's how I got my first co-founders. That's the first thing we worked on. So in 2018, we started working on that project in January, and then we did our first set of deliveries in August. And then in October is when I went full time, and then we got into kind of like selling things, and then we very quickly noticed that we needed to find a bigger market, because our whole goal was, yeah, we want to build a really big company. And once we actually started selling machines, this kind of like October, September timeframe, we noticed, oh, okay, so we're gonna be able to sell this machine. We're gonna be able to sell a few of them, but this company is never really gonna get that big, and we're never really going to get enough free cash flow to even make it bigger. So we need to find a different path if we want to build a really big company. And that different path was getting to something called Y Combinator, which is like a startup accelerator program based out of Silicon Valley. And so we got into that in the beginning of 2019. And then that is like what really started pushing us, because we said, okay, now we have a larger network of friends, and we were in the same batch as some bigger companies, like bigger cannabis plant touching companies, and then it exposed us to all these different aspects of the business, and then we could finally see like what we wanted to build in cannabis. And so then at the end of 2019, we kind of made that decision. We said, okay, cool, we're going to get into cannabis. We're going to start building robots for cannabis manufacturers. And we spun out the Roka Sorter at the end of 2019. We sold it to a couple investors, and the cool thing about that story is later those investors sold it to a bigger e-commerce company, and then like a year or so after that, that e-commerce company got acquired by eBay. So like the thing that eBay uses to do their trading card, fulfillment technology is like the thing that me and my co-founders made in my apartment in Pasadena 6 years ago.
I mean, that's pretty sweet. That's a pretty fun sell-off, right? I mean, it comes
Yeah.
with its perks of knowing that. I got to tell you, you were telling me when you said it earlier about, at the time, I think it was 2013. You said
Yeah.
crowdfunding was all about the 3D printers and playing cards. I didn't understand the playing card portion of that, and now that you've explained it to me, that is hilarious. That you come full circle in that world, and you're able to create something in that space to be able to give people, make their lives easier. I have a buddy who's a reseller of products, and I just thought of him. It wasn't even what you're specifically talking about. I'm just talking about something that could just, help him keep his shit straight right at the end of the day, instead of whatever it is he uses. I find that to be, and that's a huge place right now in a lot of people's entrepreneurial bag of tricks right now, that reseller market. So very, very cool. So the cannabis space really comes together. You guys really start making that push. Where does that leave you today? What is today's outlook on the future for you guys?
Yeah, so I guess that brings us to basically, beginning of 2020, where we're like full on cannabis, reinvested all the sell profits from that initial product line, like full on, let's build robots for cannabis manufacturers in 2020. So then we go and we start learning about the industry more deeply. I take some time off from the robotics company to help run a cannabis co-packing company in Oakland. So I spent 3 years doing that. That was super interesting because 18 months prior, I was working for NASA. And then in mid 2020, I was flipping pounds and had like a team of 30 trimmers and like packaging jars and making pre-rolls and knock boxes and stuff. So it was like super different. But I learned a lot, and it allowed us to kind of develop these technologies. So then in 2021, we launched our first piece of technology, which was the Jiko robot. We patented and invented the very first way to inject joints with cannabis concentrate in a dosing fashion. We became like, we got super weird looks at us in 2021 MJ BizCon. They're like, why did you make this? And I said, so you can make infused pre-rolls that are dosed appropriately and not like random or whatever.
Yeah, and not only that, but like spread out and like super shitty and concentrated or concentrated near the lip, where all it does is clog it, and you end up cutting off the whole thing and going straight back to paper, like the good Lord intended for us. But at the end of the day, that's, to me, I look at that. So I look at that as filling a niche that no one knew they needed, right? And people. Basically. That's when we created our company. We created a total niche in the automotive space. People were like, "Why are you here? Like, what are you trying to? Are you trying to replace people's jobs?" I'm like, no. If I wanted your job, I'd go take it. I'm trying to make people more efficient. I'm trying to do more for the industry here. So you have this. So who's the first person? I mean, you can say the name or not. Who's the first person who says, "I get that. I want to know more about the infuser robot"?
Oh, I mean, I'll say it. Like he also gave us customer testimonials. It was actually one of our customers at the co-packing company in Oakland. Guy named Christian, who runs a brand called Be More Blunts. They're actually based out of Sacramento now. And he was the first customer that we had to buy the machine, and he used it to a ton of success with his in-house brand and then co-packing. And he still has the same machine and he still runs it. It's really great because it was that problem, kind of what you'd mentioned, right? Like a problem that nobody feels quite yet, but a problem that everyone sees but doesn't know quite the solution. But we had this unique vantage point where I'm a robotics guy, and then I'm running a cannabis co-packing company. Like the Venn diagram of people that includes is like me, right? It's like there's no one.
For sure, dude. That's like it's super specific. There's not a lot of crossover. You're not going to meet a lot of other dudes like you. Plus, you have that, you have that rare, to me, rare side of both being able to see the engineering side of the world, what I would call the academia side of the world, and be able to be successful and do that, but then also come over here and have an entrepreneurial piece. I tend to think people have really weighted one or the other. You seem to be a really, really cool unicorn hybrid of both, which again, with that, I sort of feel you on the idea of looking ahead of a problem. I think that's what's made us successful in my company for the last decade, is just being able to say right before someone brings you the problem, where you go, yeah, here's the answer, and you're good, and we can keep moving forward. And I don't mind awkward looks, because when you do that, and let's not joke each other, right? It doesn't always work out. Like, I thought I was ahead of the curve on some things. I got out way ahead of things, and it did not work out. It was not good to always be out in front. All right, let's do this. I love the fact that you have kind of brought us full circle. You've brought us into the robotics world. You kind of brought us up to date. I know that we talked pre-show about what you want to talk about in the second half. So why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about here in the second half?
So I think in the second half, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the kind of continuation of that first product and what we've developed now, and we're trying to help other manufacturers, called the Stardust robot that does keef coating. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about some Schedule 3 discussions, because that's something I'm deeply interested about. So.
I am deeply interested too. And as an observer of the industry, you are in the industry. As an observer of the industry, we do some financing. We help some folks out. I've been around it for 15 years in the background, but I don't make a living here. And I give people that asterisk, so you don't have to blow me up in the DMs about how I don't understand your lives. I'm an entrepreneur. I get what we're dealing with here. I just have a big passion for this plant. So, all right. Well, I can't wait to talk about that in the second half. Thank you, everyone, for checking out the first half. As always, thank you to our sponsor, King Solomon Nutrients, my man Damian Solomon, 2 decades of badass growing experience. If you don't follow this guy, look, people tell me I'm the old guy because I use LinkedIn, but if you don't follow this guy on LinkedIn and see his life, where all he does is spend time helping people grow beautiful weed and just rolling these joints, just look like, they look like cannons, dude. Guy's the best. Check him out, ksolomonag.com. All right, we'll see you for the second half. Thank you guys so much.